And welcome to Hot Dad Reads. Having a little bit of a late start today. But that's alright. This is up. Got a little... so that way you can know where if you want to go, if you want to help out with the Patreon. Pardon me. So that way instead of me having to say, hey, go to this thing, I can just go, it's right there. Do this thing. Meh. We're reading Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. We're this far into it. We have this much left to go. So, late starts are gonna make me go late. So here we are. This is chapter 11 or 2, I don't remember. Yep, chapter 2 of book 3 of part 1. Two foursomes. One of these Parisians came from Toulouse, another from Limoges, the third from Cahors, and the fourth from Montauban. But they were students, and to say student is another way of saying Parisian. To study in Paris is to be born in Paris. They were unexceptional young men. Everyone has seen their type. 4 average specimens, neither good nor bad, learned nor ignorant, geniuses nor fools, with the handsome looks of that delightful springtime we call the age of 20. They were 4 ordinary Oscars, for at that time Arthurs did not yet exist. "Burn him for the perfumes of Araby," exclaimed the love song. "Oscar approaches. Oscar, I shall see him. Ossian has left his mark. The fashionable was Scandinavian and Caledonian. The pure English style would not prevail until later, and the first of the Arthurs, Wellington, had only just won the Battle of Waterloo." The names of these particular Oscars were Felix Tholomyès from Toulouse, Listolier from Cahors, Famuel from Limoges, and lastly Blachevelle from Montauban. Naturally, each of them had his mistress. Blachevelle loved Favourite, so named because she had been in England. Listolier adored Dahlia, who had taken as her nom de guerre the name of a flower. Famuel idolized Zéphine, short for Josephine. Ptolemy's had Fantine, known as the Blonde because of her beautiful hair, the color of sunlight. Favorite, Dahlia, Zéphine, and Fantine were 4 lovely young women, sweet-smelling and radiant, still with an air of the seamstress about them, not having entirely forsaken their sewing needles, giddy with their love affairs, but still with the lingering serenity of work on their faces, and in their souls that bloom of innocence that survives a woman's first fall. There was one of the 4 they called the baby, because she was the youngest, and one they called the old lady. The old lady was 23. To be quite candid, the first 3 were more experienced, more reckless, and more pitched into the tumult of life than Fantine, the blonde, who was still cherishing her first illusion. Dahlia, Zéphine, and especially Favourite could not have said the same. There was already more than one episode in their stories, which had only just begun, and the lover, whose name was Adolphe in the first chapter, turned out to be Alphonse in the second, and Gustave in the third. Poverty and love of finery are 2 disastrous counselors. One scolds, and the other flatters. The beautiful young girls of humble origin have both whispering in their ears, one on either side. These ill-protected souls pay heed. That is how they come to be fallen women and to have stones thrown at them. But they are oppressed by the splendor of all that is snow-white and unattainable. Alas, what if the Jungfrau were hungry? Dahlia and Zéphine were admirers of Favourite because she had been to England. She was living on her own very early in life. Her father was a churlish old mathematics teacher, full of himself, unmarried, running round town giving private lessons despite his age. As a young man, this teacher had one day seen a chambermaid catch her dress on a fender. He fell in love as a consequence of that chance incident. Favourite was the result. She would run into her father from time to time, who would nod to her. One morning a nunnish-looking woman came to see her at home and said, "You don't know me, mademoiselle." "No? I'm your mother." Then the old woman helped herself to food and drink, had a mattress she owned delivered there, and moved in. This peevish and sanctimonious mother never spoke to Fantine, never spoke to Favourite, let hours go by without uttering a word, ate enough to feed 4, morning, noon, and night, and would go down to chat in the porter's lodge, where she spoke ill of her daughter. What had drawn Dahlia to Listolier, and possibly to others, to idleness, was having excessively pretty pink nails. How could she put nails like that to work? The girl who wants to remain virtuous must have no pity for her husband, must have no pity for her hands. Reading is hard today. As for Zéphine, she had conquered Fameuil. I'm just reading half of these French names like they're elves in Lord of the Rings. She had conquered Fameuil by the saucily caressive way she had of saying, "Yes, monsieur." The young men were chums. The young girls were friends. Such loves are always matched by such friendships. It is one thing to be virtuous and another to be philosophical. The proof of this being that, with all due reservations about such irregular relationships, Favourite, Zéphine, and Dahlia were philosophical young women, and Fantine a virtuous one. Virtuous, some will say. And what about Ptolemy's? Solomon would reply that love constitutes virtue. We will confine ourselves to saying that Fantine's love was a first love, an exclusive love, a true love. She alone of the 4 was on intimate terms with one man only. Intimacy here being expressed by the use of the term of the tu form, elle non fut tutoyée que par un seul. Awesome. Fantine was one of those creatures born, so to speak, of the common people. She emerged from the most unfathomable depths of social obscurity, bearing on her brow the mark of anonymity and of unknown origins. She was born at Montreuil-sur-Mer. Of what parents? Who can say? She had never been known to have father or mother. She was called Fantine. Why Fantine? She had never been called by any other name. At the time of her birth, the Directory was still in existence. No family name, since she had no family, and no baptismal name, since the church was gone. She was called whatever took the fancy of whoever it was that first came across her as a very small child, running barefoot in the street. She accepted a name the way she accepted moisture from the clouds on her forehead when it rained. She was called Little Fantine. That is all anyone knew about her. Such was this human being's start in life. At the age of 10, Fantine left town and went into domestic service with some local farmers. At 15, she came to Paris to seek her fortune. Fantine was beautiful, and remained chaste as long as she could. She was a lovely blonde with splendid teeth. She had gold and pearls for her dowry, but her gold was her head of hair, and her pearls were in her mouth. She worked to keep herself alive. Then, also to keep herself alive, she loved, for the heart has its own hunger. She loved Ptolemy's. A conquest for him, for her the love of her life. The streets of the Latin Quarter, thronged with students and grisettes, saw the beginning of this liaison. In that maze of streets on the Pantheon Hill, the scene of the making and unmaking of so many intrigues, Fantine had long evaded Ptolemy's, but in such a way as to keep running into him. Right now my cat is just going absolutely wild with a little dolphin toy on the floor. It's not distracting at all. Hey, buddy. Oh, there he goes. There is a way of avoiding someone that is very like seeking that person out. In short, the shepherd won his shepherdess. Blachevelle, Listolier, and Fameuil formed a kind of group of which Ptolemy's was the leader. He was the joker. Oh my god. Ptolemy's was the classic perpetual student. My wife is laughing and I'm laughing. He was rich. He had an income of 4,000 francs. 4,000 francs. A glorious scandal at Mont Saint-Geneviève. Ptolemy's was a 30-year-old pleasure seeker and badly preserved. He was wrinkled and toothless, and he was beginning to show signs of baldness. He himself sang of it unsentimentally, cock of the walk at 30, coot at 40. His digestion was poor, and one of his eyes had started watering. But as his youthfulness burned out, his light-heartedness was ignited. He replaced his teeth with buffooneries, his hair with mirth, his health with irony, and in his weeping eye there was always laughter. He was a wreck, but flourishing. Upping sticks long before its time, his youth beat an orderly retreat with gales of laughter, and no one noticed. He had a play rejected at the vaudeville. He wrote the odd, undistinguished poem. Moreover, he was skeptical about everything in a superior way, a great strength in the eyes of the weak. So, being ironic and bald, he was their leader. Is it possible that irony comes from the English word iron? One day Ptolemy's took the other three aside and made sure he had their full attention and said, Fantine, Dahlia, Zéphine, and Favourite have been asking us for nearly a year to give them a surprise. We've made a solemn promise to do so. They're always talking about it, especially to me. Just as the old women in Naples cry to St. Januarius, Faccia Galiutta fa o miracolo. Yellow face, perform your miracle, so our beauties keep saying. Ptolemy's, when are you going to deliver your surprise? At the same time, our parents keep writing to us. Attacked at both sides, I think the time has come. Let's talk. At this point, Ptolemy's lowered his voice and mysteriously described something so amusing that a huge, enthusiastic guffaw emerged simultaneously from the mouths of all four of them, and Blachevelle cried, "That's a great idea!" Finding themselves outside a smoke-filled bar, they went inside, and the rest of their confabulations were shrouded in obscurity. The result of this shadowy conspiracy was a brilliant outing that took place the following Sunday, to which the four young men invited the four young women. And I'm thirsty. There's my water. Patreon.com/HotDadReads. It's where you can be able to get access to all the books I've already read and access to the super secret Saturday Shakespeare stream. I pressed a button I've never pressed before. Once again, Patreon.com/HotDadReads. You know what's funny is that this is probably flipped, so it's over here or something. I'll find out when I edit this, but we'll get there. Anywho, Chapter 3, Haphazard Pairings. It is hard nowadays to picture what a country outing for students and grisettes was like 45 years ago. Grisettes? Grisettes? I'll call it grisettes. Paris no longer has the same surroundings. The face of what might be called outer Parisian life has completely changed in the last half-century. Where there was once the cuckoo, there is now the railway carriage. Lumbering, box-shaped, brightly painted carriages with benches for up to 12 passengers and used mostly by the poorer classes. Neat. Where there was once the old barge, there was now the steamboat. Today, people talk of Fécamp as in the past they spoke of St. Cloud. Paris of 1862 is a city with all of France for its outskirts. Hey, buddy. Bonjour, mon capitaine. That was the nice thing. I got to spend a couple of days in Paris before the pandemic. And yet I still can't speak French. But people didn't say bonjour. They didn't say bonjour, They sang it. Anytime I heard someone say it, it was always like, just bonjour. It was just so like friendly and happy and wonderful. And buddy, this book weighs 15 pounds. I need you to pick a spot here. There we go. Nope. Okay, there we go. Figure it out, buddy. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. The four couples conscientiously performed all the country excursion rituals possible at that time. The holiday season was just beginning, and it was a warm, bright summer's day. Favourite, the only one of the girls who knew how to write, in the name of all four, had written the following to Ptolemy's the day before. An early start is a good start. That is why they rose at 5 o'clock in the morning. Then they took the passenger barge to St. Cloud, looked at the dry fountain and cried, "It must look splendid when there's water." They breakfasted at the Tête Noire before Castaing had yet been there. Is that a name? Oh. They treated themselves to a game of ring-throwing among the rows of trees by the large pond, went up the lantern of Diogenes, played roulette for macaroons on the Pont de Serre, picked flowers at Puteaux, bought reed pipes at Neuilly, ate apple turnovers wherever they went, were perfectly happy. The young girls chirruped and chattered like fugitive songbirds. It was bliss. Now and again they gave the young men little slaps, morning of life's ecstasy, delightful years, dragonflies' wings all a-quiver. Oh, no matter who you may be, don't you remember? Have you walked through the bushes, holding aside the branches for the pretty face following behind you? Have you slid on a slope wet with rain, laughing, with a woman you love catching you by the hand and crying, "Oh, my brand new ankle boots, just look at the state of them"? Let us say at once this good-humored party was spared the vexatious joy of a shower, although Favourite, sounding authoritative, had said as they set out, "The slugs are out on the paths, a sign of rain, my dears." All four of them were exceedingly pretty. Monsieur le Chevalier de Labois, famous at that time as a good old classic poet who had his Eleanor, was strolling under the chestnut trees of St. Cloud that day when he saw them pass by at about 10 o'clock in the morning, and exclaimed, "There's one too many," thinking of the Graces. Favourite, Blachevet's girl, the 23-year-old, the old lady, ran ahead beneath the great green boughs, jumping ditches, deliriously leaping over bushes, and presided over this merrymaking with the spiritedness of a young fawn. Zéphine and Dahlia, whose beauty happened to be such that they set each other off to advantage and complimented each other, were never apart, more out of flirtatious instinct than friendship. And clinging to each other, they struck English poses. The first keepsakes had just started to appear. Melancholy was the incoming fashion for women, as later Byronism was for men. And hairstyles for the tender sex were beginning to have a weeping look about them. Zéphine and Dahlia had their hair dressed in ringlets. Listolier and Fameuil, engaged in a discussion about their professors, explained to Fantine the difference between Monsieur Delvincourt and Monsieur Blondeau. Something I just learned recently, that apparently just before Napoleon, I think it was, basically when there was, a lot of royals getting killed, if you will, that when they were able to safely return, they would have these very macabre parties where, like, the women would wear, like, a white sheet for a dress, because, like, that's what they would have had to wear if they had made it to prison, and they would bow to each other with a sharp jolt of the neck to mock the noose when they were being hung. And the women, I believe, had dark makeup around the eyes, but also they cut their hair very short, because before you would be beheaded, like axed or guillotined or whatnot, they would cut off your hair to make sure they could see your neck. So, like, this style for French aristocratic women of, like, short hair and dark makeup, and there's something just very goth about the whole thing. And I don't know, it was cool and French. I learned this because in the trailer for the Napoleon movie that's coming out pretty soon, someone had taken a screenshot of one of the women characters. I don't know the names of anyone in there besides Napoleon, unless never mind. I was gonna make a bad joke, but the point being that they talked about that and gave that bit of history, and I was like, oh, that's neat. So not only is it a thing, it's a thing that'll be in a movie. Blachevelle looked as if he had been created for the sole purpose of carrying on his arm, that Sunday, Favourite's Tourneau shawl, patterned at one end only. Ptolemy's followed behind, dominating the group. He was very cheerful, but you could sense the controlling force in him. There was dictatorship in his jollity. His principal ornament was a pair of nankeen bell-bottom trousers with footstraps of braided copper. Pardon me. He had in his hand a strong cane walking stick that had cost 200 francs, and, since he denied himself nothing, a strange thing called a cigar in his mouth. Holding nothing sacred, he smoked. That Ptolemy's is amazing, said the others in awe. What trousers! What energy! As for Fantine, she was the essence of joy. Her splendid teeth had evidently been provided by God for a purpose: laughter. She preferred to carry in her hand her little straw hat with its long white ribbons, rather than wear it on her head. Her thick blonde hair, inclining to fan out and easily falling loose, and which she had to keep pinning up again, seemed made for Galatia's flight under the willows. Her rosy lips babbled with delight. The voluptuously turned-up corners of her mouth, as in the ancient masks of Erigone, seemed to encourage the bold. But above this exuberance, in the lower part of her face, her long, shadowy eyelashes were discreetly cast down, like a call to order. There was something ineffably charming and resplendent about her entire outfit. She wore a dress of mauve barège, little reddish-brown shoes cross-laced over her fine, white, lacy stockings. Barège, a light, gauzy wool fabric originally made in Barège in southwestern France. And that Marseille invention, a type of muslin spencer whose name, canezou, a corruption of the words Queen's Out, as pronounced in the Canabière, evokes sunny weather, a hot climate, and the south. The other three, less bashful, as we have already said, were simply bare-fleshed and low-cut dresses, which in summer, beneath flower-covered hats, looks very charming and flirtatious. But beside, but beside their provocative attire, blonde Fantine's canezou, with its transparencies, its suggestiveness, and its modesty at once concealing and revealing, seemed an alluring contrivance of decency. And the famous court of love, presided over by the Vicomte d'Excet, by the Vicomtesse de Chette, I think, with her sea-green eyes, might have awarded the prize for flirtatiousness to this canezou competing for modesty. The simplest is sometimes the canniest. It can happen. Stunning to look at, with a delicate profile, eyes of deep blue, fleshy eyelids, small arched feet, beautifully turned wrists and ankles, a white complexion showing here and there the azure-tinted branching of the veins, fresh young cheeks, the sturdy neck of Aeginetan Junos. Aeginetan Junos. Alright, sure. Strong and supple in the nape. Shoulders that might have been modeled by Cousteau, with a voluptuous dimple in the middle visible through the muslin. Gaiety, tempered with dreaminess. Sculptural and exquisite, such was Fantine. And discernible beneath these trappings and ribbons was a statue, and within this statue a soul. Fantine was beautiful without really being aware of it. Those rare visionaries, mysterious high priests of the beautiful who silently compare everything with perfection, would have glimpsed in this young working girl, through the transparency of her Parisian grace, the sacred euphony of antiquity. This child of obscurity was an aristocrat. She was beautiful in both aspects, style and rhythm. Style is the form the ideal takes, and rhythm its movement. We have said that Fantine was joyfulness. Fantine was also demureness. To any observer who might have studied her closely, what emanated from her through all that giddiness of youth, of the season, and of her love affair, was an invincible expression of reserve and modesty. She remained a little astonished. This chaste astonishment is the subtle, slender, white fingers of the Vestal Virgin who stirs the ashes of the sacred fire with a golden pin. Although she would have refused Ptolemy's nothing, as we shall see only too clearly, her face in repose was supremely virginal. A grave and almost austere dignity suddenly overcame her at certain times, and there was nothing more singular and disturbing than to see her gaiety so quickly subside and introversion succeed her exuberance without any transition. This abrupt seriousness, sometimes of a pronounced severity, resembled the disdain of a goddess. Her brow, nose, and chin presented that balance of line, quite distinct from balance of proportion, from which the harmony of the face derives. In that very telling space that separates the base of the nose from the upper lip, she had a slight and charming hollow, the mysterious sign of chastity that made Barbarossa fall in love with a Diana found in the excavations at Iconium. Love may very well be a transgression. Fantine was the innocence that survives transgression. The next chapter is called Ptolemy's is so happy he sings a Spanish song. Taking a small break. I had a great night at poker last Friday. just a great night. Played well, had good friendship, made some money. It was nice. It was supposed to be a short-handed night. Only like 4 of us, maybe 5. We ended up having like 8, so it worked out great. Even then, like, my strategy when it's shorthanded is basically to limp a lot, to see a lot of flops, and to stick with like a 3x raise. That's about it. But as the hands go up, as the ring goes up, the number of people at the ring goes up, when you get to 6, 7, 8 people at that point, I'm doing like an 8x raise, sometimes a 12x raise, because they're not professionals. They don't understand. You have to really force people with bad hands to not call. Play your position well. And then when people do call, it's like, oh, I'm going to have you dominated. Because either it's dumb that you called, or I have an idea of what your range might be, depending on the type of player. It was a good time. Had a lot of fun. What else did I do this weekend? The little one's teething, which is great. She already has 2 bottom teeth, but now she's got just 1 big top tooth coming down. And like, it just seems larger, it just seems wider, I think, because it's an incisor. And it's so cute when she smiles, because there weren't teeth there before. It was so cute. She was a little baby smiling at me, and just gums and lips and a little tongue, and just, But now there's like little teeth. Like, it seems like it would be threatening, but it's strangely not. Also today, I played a tabletop RPG online with some friends, where we were mice, and it was meant to be a one-shot. It was meant to be just like, we'll just try this out this time, no big deal. And other games I've played, I've always been like dark and morose or evil or something like that. And I was like, no, I'm just a happy little mouse. That's all that's happening here. And 5 minutes into it, we had caught a rat in a mouse trap. And I thought we cut his head off. We actually just broke his neck. So I was like, we got to storm the town. I'm going to grab the rat's head and run inside. And they're like, oh, his head doesn't come off. It's still there. So I ended up taking 10 mouse minutes to cut off a giant rat's head so I could brandish it on my way running into the town to fight off 3 other rats. And I was like, listen, I did not expect to be this macabre this fast. It was a grisly sight, to say the least. It was a fun game. I liked it. Chapter 4. Ptolemies is so happy he sings a Spanish song. That whole day was dawn, from morning till night. All nature seemed to be on holiday and filled with gladness. The flower beds of St. Cloud perfumed the air. The breeze on the Seine softly stirred the leaves. Branches waved in the wind. Bees plundered the jasmine. A whole artistic colony of butterflies frolicked among the yarrow, clover, and wild oats. In the King of France's majestic park there were vagabonds aplenty, the birds. The 4 joyous couples reveled in the sunshine amid these fields, flowers, and trees. And in this shared paradise, talking, singing, running, dancing, chasing butterflies, gathering bindweed, getting their pink lace stockings wet in the tall grass, radiant, flighty, meaning no harm. Every girl received, a little randomly, the kisses of every man, with the exception of Fantine. Remote in her abstracted, shy, dreamy resistance, she was in love. You always have that look about you, said Favourite. Such is true joy. This gallivanting of happy couples has a deep affinity with life and with nature, and elicits from everything fondness and light. Once upon a time there was a fairy who created the fields and forests specially for those in love. Hence the eternal truancy of lovers who are forever escaping to the countryside, and will go on doing so as long as lovers and countryside continue to exist. Hence the popularity of springtime among thinkers. The nobleman and the lowly paid worker, duke and upstart, courtiers and townsfolk, as they used to say in the old days, are all vassals of this fairy. People laugh, they seek each other out, and there is in the air a sublime brilliance. What a difference being in love makes. Notaries, clerks are gods, and little shrieks, the chasing through the grass, the chance to put an arm around a waist, those sweet nothings that are music to the ear, the adoration declared in the way a single syllable is uttered, those cherries plucked from one mouth to another, all this becomes part of the coruscating heavenly radiance. Beautiful young women are sweetly lavish of themselves. They think this will never end. Philosophers, poets, painters observe these raptures and do not know what to make of them. So bedazzled are they. The departure for Cytherea, cries Watteau. Lancret, painter of the lower classes, observes his commoners going off into the blue. It's not Watteau, it's Watteau. Diderot opens his arms to all these dalliances, and Dieuf introduces druids among them. I know this because in the Gilbert and Sullivan operetta Trial by Jury, there is the line, breathing concentrated Otto and existence a la Watteau. After breakfast, the four couples went to what was then called the King's Square to see a plant recently arrived from India whose name escapes us at present, which at that time was drawing the whole of Paris to St. Cloud. It was a bizarre, yet attractive, long-stemmed shrub with countless branches of thread-like slenderness. Tangled and leafless, and covered in a million tiny white rosettes, which made the shrub look like a head of hair spangled with flowers, there was always an admiring crowd around it. After viewing the shrub, Ptolemies exclaimed, "Donkey rides on me!" And having agreed a price with the owner of the donkeys, they rode back by way of Vanves and Issy. At Issy an incident occurred. By chance, the park, confiscated land at that time owned by the army supplier Bergevin, happened to be wide open. They went through the gates, visited the model of an anchorite in his grotto, tried the mysterious distorting effects of the famous Chamber of Mirrors, a lewd trap worthy of some millionaire satyr or Turcarid metamorphosed into Priapus. Vigorously, they set in motion the big net swing attached to the two chestnut trees extolled by Abbe de Bernis, and while swinging the girls in it one after the other, which amid general laughter created all the billowing skirts Greuze might have wished to see, Ptolemies from Toulouse, who had a touch of the Spaniard about him, Toulouse being related to Tolosa, sang to a melancholy tune the old Galician song, probably inspired by some lovely maiden flying through the air on a rope hung between two trees. So sorry. Soy de Barrios, amor mi llama, toda mi alma, es en mi ojos, porque enseñas a tus piernas. Fantine alone refused to go on the swing. I don't like people putting on airs like that, Favourite muttered tartly. Their donkeys gave way to a fresh delight. They crossed the Seine in a boat, and from Passy arrived at the Etoile gate on foot. Let us not forget they have been up since 5 o'clock that morning, but, bah! There's no such thing as tiredness on Sundays, as Favourite would say. On Sundays, Tiredness has the day off. At about 3 o'clock or 4, at about 3 o'clock, the four gleefully terrified couples were rattling down on the coaster ride, a curious structure which then stood on the Beaujon Heights, and whose serpentine loops could be seen outlined above the trees on the Champs-Elysees. From time to time, Favourite cried out, "What about the surprise? I want the surprise!" "Patience," replied Ptolemies. Do one more chapter. I just want to say, having been to France, I got to see the Seine. It was at a pretty thin point of it, but nonetheless. But had a wonderful morning. We left our hotel. We went on a bit of a walk. My wife got some coffee. I had a baguette, and we just sat by the Seine. The Seine. The Seine. And because the joke is that, if you fall in the water, then you're insane. But it was wonderful. Just sat around, had a baguette. Didn't do anything else. Just sat there. Good time. And I can pronounce Champs-Elysees because I watched the Tour de France. Or at least I did back, when an American was winning it. And it turns out that he was cheating the whole time. But so is everyone. But, what are you going to do about that? Chapter 5, at Bombarda's. When they had exhausted the delights of the coaster ride, their thoughts turned to eating. And the radiant party of 8, somewhat stirred at last, fetched up at Bombarda's Tavern, a subsidiary establishment set up on the Champs-Elysees by Bombarda, the owner of the famous restaurant whose sign then hung in the Rue de Rivoli near the Passage de l'Orme. Okay, so, I've been on the Champs-Elysees, and I specifically, that was actually where, and it's kind of corny, but I went to a McDonald's because, like the movie Pulp Fiction, I wanted to order a Royale with cheese. They didn't have it. They had a quarter pounder. I was real mad. About that. Why is this being weird? Come on now. There we go. So, anyway, yeah. A large but ugly room with an alcove containing a bed at the back of it, given how crowded the tavern was on a Sunday, they had no choice but to accept this accommodation. 2 windows affording a view of the embankment and the river through the elm trees. A magnificent August sunbeam glancing across the windows. 2 tables. On one, a triumphant pile of posies mingled with ladies' and gents' hats. At the other, the 4 couples seated round a festive clutter of dishes, plates, glasses, and bottles, jugs of beer along with flasks of wine. Not much orderliness on the table, some disorderliness underneath it. The noise they made under the table, drumming their feet, a terrible din. It was unbearable, says Molière. Molière. This was where the pastoral idyll that began at 5 o'clock in the morning had got to by 4:30 in the afternoon. The sun was setting, appetites had been satisfied. Thronging and full of sunshine, the Champs-Elysees were all light and dust. 2 things that constitute Elysian glory. Those whinnying marbles, the Marley horses, reared up in a golden cloud. There was a toing and froing of carriages. A detachment of magnificent lifeguards, led by a bugler, descended Avenue de Neuilly. The white flag, faintly pink in the sunset, fluttered above the dome of the Tuileries. Place de la Concorde, which had become once more Place Louis XV, was teeming with happy pedestrians. Many wore the silver fleur-de-lis on the moire ribbon that in 1817 had not yet entirely disappeared from buttonholes. Here and there, Among applauding passers-by who gathered around them, little girls danced in a ring to a then well-known Bourbon rhyme destined to spell the end of the 100 days, which had as its refrain, "Give us back our Père de Gonde, give us back our Père." During the 100 days, Louis XVIII fled to Ghent, Gonde in French. The children's rhyme contains a playful pun, Notre Père de Gonde, our father in Ghent. Sounds the same as Notre Père de Gaunt, our pair of gloves. Ah, puns. I have always been obliged to love all puns, group hugs, dogs with human names, and babies wearing bow ties. Ooh, a question. What's my favorite book? Off the top of my head, I'm going to say Haji Murad by Tolstoy, which hopefully we can read in the coming months. But I just remember it's a short story, and the twist in it is amazing. And just the perspective and the story itself, and just the parts where it's like, this is the author having an eyewitness of these events. Fantastic. It's a fantastic book. And I'm pretty sure it's in the public domain, so I don't know. When we finish all of this, maybe we'll get to read that. Where are we at? Scattered groups of suburban folk dressed in their Sunday best, sometimes even wearing the fleur-de-lis like city dwellers, played the ring game and went round on the wooden carousel horses in the spacious Care Marigny. Others drank. A few, printers' apprentices, wore paper caps. They could be heard laughing. Everything was radiant. It was a time of undeniable peace and the utmost royalist security. It was the period when a special private report from Prefect of Police Anglais to the king about the suburbs of Paris concluded with these lines, "All things considered, sire, there is nothing to be feared from these people. They are as easygoing and indolent as cats. The populace is restless in the provinces, not in Paris. All these men are small fry. It would take two of them, one standing on the other, sire, to match one of your grenadiers. There is nothing to be feared from the capital's populace. It is remarkable that the average height of this population has fallen in the last 50 years. And the people of Paris's suburbs are smaller than before the revolution. They are not dangerous. In short, they are harmless riffraff." Police prefects do not believe a cat can possibly turn into a lion. Yet it can, and that is the miracle of the Paris populace. Moreover, the cat, so despised by Comte Anglais, was held in esteem by the republics of antiquity. It embodied freedom in their eyes, and as though to serve as a pendant to the wingless Minerva of Piraeus, yeah, whatever. There stood on the public square in Corinth the bronze colossus of a cat. The naive police of the Restoration took too favorable a view of the people of Paris. They are not such harmless riffraff as is thought. The Parisian is to the Frenchman what the Athenian was to the Greek. No one sleeps more soundly than he. No one is more downright frivolous and lazy, no one more apparently forgetful. Yet in this he is not to be trusted. He is prone to indolence of every sort, but when there is glory at stake, he is a wonder, capable of all kinds of fury. Give him a pike, he will deliver the 10th of August. Give him a gun, you will have Austerlitz. He is Napoleon's mainstay and Danton's power base. Is his country at stake? He enlists. Is liberty at stake? He rips up the cobblestones. Beware! His hair bristles with epic rage. His shirt hangs about him like the chlamys. Watch out! He will make caudine forks of any Rue Greneta. If the hour strikes, this working-class Parisian will grow in stature. This little man will rise up, and his gaze will be terrible, and his breath will become a hurricane. And from that poor, puny chest will issue wind enough to reshape the contours of the Alps. It is thanks to the working-class Parisian that the revolution, taken to the army, conquers Europe. He sings. That is his pleasure. Give him a song to match his nature, and you will see, as long as he has only the Carmagnole to sing, all he does is overthrow Louis XVI. Have him sing the Marseillaise, and he will free the world. With this note written in the margin of Anglaise's report, we return to our four couples. The meal, as we said, was drawing to a close. Oh, this part's real short. Oh, yeah. I'm going to do my best to read the whole book. Like, we're not reading it all tonight. I'm going to finish after this chapter. But, and we got a schedule, Monday through Thursday. I'm going to be adjusting the schedule probably later tonight to have a couple days that are longer and taking some Wednesdays off when I need to. Because I'm going to have rehearsal coming up soon, so I need to read more of this book at a time. So, yeah, I hope I can finish. This is the longest book I've ever seen. I read Moby Dick. It was 600 pages. This is like 13. This is 2 Moby Dicks. It's ridiculous. It's very exciting. Let me finish this chapter real quick. Chapter 6, chapter in which lovers adore. Table talk, lovers talk, both are equally elusive. Lovers talk is castle building. Table talk is pipe dreaming. Fameuil and Dahlia were humming. Ptolemy's drinking. Zéphine laughing. Fantine smiling. Listolier was blowing a wooden trumpet he had bought at Saint Cloud. Favourite gazed tenderly at Blachevelle and said, "Blachevelle, I adore you." This prompted Blachevelle to ask, What would you do, Favourite, if I stopped loving you?" "What would I do?" cried Favourite. "Oh, don't say that even as a joke. If you stopped loving me, I'd come after you. I'd scratch and claw you. I'd throw water over you. I'd have you arrested." Blachevelle smiled with the voluptuous self-conceit of a man whose vanity is flattered. Favourite went on, "Yes, I'd send the police after you. Oh, I'd make no end of a fuss, you scoundrel." Blachevelle threw himself back in his chair in ecstasy and proudly closed his eyes. As she ate, Dahlia said quietly to Favourite amid the uproar, "So you really worship your Blachevelle, do you?" "I detest him," replied Favourite in a similar undertone, picking up her fork again. "He's stingy. It's the lad who lives opposite me I love. He's very well-mannered. That young man, you know the one? You can see he's got the makings of an actor. I love actors. As soon as he comes home, his mother says, 'Oh, Lord, that's the end of my peace and quiet. Now he's going to start shouting. My dear boy, you drive me crazy.' Because he goes right up to the top of the house, climbs up to some rat-ridden attic, some dark, poky corner, and then sings and recites, don't ask me what, and you can hear him all the way downstairs. He earns 20 sous a day writing pettifogging documents for some lawyer. He's the son of a former choir master at Saint-Jacques-de-Haut-Pas. Oh, he's a real gentleman. He adores me so much that one day, when he saw me making pancake batter, he said to me, 'Mademoiselle, make your gloves into fritters and I'll eat them.' Only an artist would say something like that. Oh, he's such a gentleman. I'm falling madly in love with that boy. All the same, I tell Blachevelle I adore him. What a liar I am, eh? What's a liar?" Favourite paused, then went on, "You see, Dahlia, I feel miserable. It's done nothing but rain all summer. The wind's always blowing. It gets on my nerves. Blachevelle's very tight-fisted. There are hardly any peas in the market. You don't know what to eat. I'm down in the dumps, as the English say. Butter's so expensive, and look, here we are, eating in a room with a bed in it. It's disgusting. It makes me fed up with life. That's the chapter. And that's where I'm going to stop tonight. But, yeah, thank you so much for tuning in. You can always check out... there are other videos on the Twitch channel or on youtube.com/@HotDadReads, where you can also see the other chapters we've done so far. And subscribing on the Patreon gets you access to the super secret Saturday Shakespeare streams, where on a random Saturday we read Shakespeare. We're finishing up Julius Caesar. We've got 2 acts left of that. And you also get access to the books we've already written, which include Pride and Prejudice and War of the Worlds. I also read Much Ado About Nothing, so that's there. But hey, thanks so much for tuning in. And I'm tired. Tomorrow, pending the little one, I might start at 9 o'clock and read for 2 hours. We're gonna try that out some more. Because last Thursday, the 2-hour read went really well. But yeah, I'll make those adjustments on all the various social medias, Instagram and Twitter, @HotDadReads. And yeah. Hopefully, listening to me read this, you get to, relax, do some dishes, play some Legend of Zelda, like my wife is playing right now. So, enjoy yourself, have a good night, and let me read you a book. And it's summer, I'm sure the kids have to read Les Miserables for homework or something, so it's, let me do your homework for you. All right. Have yourselves an agreeable evening.